My story is I grew up in Greenville, North Carolina, which is a super small town, and I always knew that I wanted to do art and music and skateboarding. And those were the three things that my life really revolved around as a kid, and I've always done those growing up. And so art seemed like the most financially viable thing to do. And so in high school, I applied to a bunch of art schools, got into the Savannah College of Art and Design. And at that time, I thought I was going to do album covers. I had just sold my first piece of art to a music artist called Bass Nectar for his album cover. So I really thought I was going to go into graphic design. And then at the Savannah College of Art and Design, I found their major called motion media, which I fell in love with, and I ended up majoring in that with a minor in graphic design. And that was really exciting because I started working with a lot of different mediums, going into photography and video, mixing that with 3D and 2D practices. And I had a lot of amazing teachers that introduced me to all sorts of different techniques, which allowed me to get my first job in San Francisco, California, with a studio called Autofuss, which did a lot of multimedia stuff. They used robots and laser cutting and would do live action mixed with digital techniques. And I went out there primarily because a now close friend of mine, G Monk, interviewed me in school and then brought me out to work at that studio. And he's been a big mentor in pushing me on a lot of practical effects and multimedia practices. And I just kept pushing that end of my work. And after I left Autofuss, I started freelancing in San Francisco and have been doing that since 2014. And now I work from home, mostly as a remote designer, animator, director, doing anything from sound design to practical effects to 2D and 3D practices. And most of my work is with music brands, so I'll do live visual content for music artists, or I'll make music videos, or work with brands like Fender Music to do promotional material for their guitars. And my work has given me a lot of different varieties of techniques to use, and that's kept it really exciting for me. And I'm continuing to work in San Francisco and work with a lot of brands in that area and primarily work from my home studio. So it's a very exciting journey from small town to big Silicon Valley lifestyle. So, yeah.
It's okay, you don't have the clap at the end.
It was a good resolution for me. I think I'm done. So I have many mentors in my life. I think the biggest ones are definitely my family. They're all in the medical fields. So even though they don't do artistic projects, they all are really devoted to their work and are very passionate about what they do. And I think that really affected how I approach my work, because even though it's not the same type of thing, I really care about what I work on, and that really comes from my family. And so they've been a huge inspiration, and my parents have always mentored me throughout my life. Another huge mentor for me has been G Monk. He was a big design hero when I was in college, and he interviewed me when I was getting ready to graduate from the Savannah College of Art and Design. And he got me my first gig at a studio called Autofuss, which is where he was working at the time. And he's always given me these opportunities to push myself, and has always been good at helping me focus on how to get better, and always trying to get me more excited about things. I can be a very mellow person, so he's always trying to get me hyped and energized on what I'm working on. So I owe so much to G Monk, and now we're very close friends, and we work on a lot of side projects, and just recently did a project in China, so we've been traveling, and it's been so exciting and humbling to work with that guy. So I owe so much to him. And then I've had a few other mentors. I had an Adobe mentor for a group, the Adobe Mentorship Program, which was Lilith Hyreprian. I'm not totally sure how to say her last name, but she was working at PsyOp at the time. She's an amazing 3D artist, and she mentored myself and a few of my schoolmates on a project, which I later called Decrypt, and I learned a ton from her on that project. And mentors have been super important for me because so much of the journey is just trying to figure out where I'm trying to go as a designer and an artist, and seeing people who have taken the road down and, they're in their 40s or 50s, and seeing where their life is after taking the journey that they did. It gives me a lot of scope on my own life and saying, okay, I could go down this route and end up in a place where they are, and that, maybe that's what I'm really looking to do. Or I could say, oh, a piece of their journey is really what I want to do, but then I'd like to steer off onto my own path at some point. And so having people like G-Monk in my life has been very inspiring and has given me a lot of solid direction on what I want to do as an artist and designer. Usually when I start a project, it's always on the research end because I feel like the concept and the roots of an idea are the most important part of a project for me. So usually I will look up a lot of things that relate to the project or the brand, go into dictionary and look up words and see the specific definitions and find associated words. A big thing I like to do, which is something I learned in college at SCAD, is mind mapping, where you write out these webs of associated words and you just see where your mind goes with them. And then that usually leads me to a lot of weird combinations of words. And then from there, I can go online and start Googling things. I try to evade going to things like Pinterest or anything like that until later on in the project, because I feel like Pinterest is great for finding visual inspiration and like really great projects. But if I do that too soon, then my work starts looking and conceptually being very similar to other projects. So I'll spend a lot of time in my sketchbook starting most of my projects and having conversations with people, talking about the ideas, getting it out in the open rather than trying to keep it all in my mind. And that helps me work through the foundation for the project. And then from there, I can start testing things and finding materials and having the project start developing the outer layers and becoming something. So my experimental style, I think, really started in college when I was experimenting with a lot of different mediums. Luckily, the major I was in, motion media, was very open-ended. You didn't really have to learn a specific thing and do it a specific way, which is why I love that major so much. And so I learned some basics like Cinema 4D, After Effects, Illustrator, a lot of the things to put projects together. But where I started getting really excited was when I got a really cheap Canon T2i camera and I got a projector, and I started taking my digital pieces and projecting them onto like trays of water, plexiglass, and then using those elements to warp the image, and then it would be like displayed on the ceiling of my living room or something, and I would photograph that or videotape it and bring that back in. And so I'd get these weird transitions that I never knew how to do digitally, but I could do them in the real world. And that also excited me because then my roommates would come out of the room and be like, hey, what are you doing out here with a projector and a tray of water? And like, what's this thing on the ceiling? And be like, oh, that's for one of my classes. And so they'd hang out with me and, we talk about results that, what was happening, what looked interesting, what wasn't working. And I think that was what made me so excited about experimental techniques, is that you get to interact with people a lot of the time. You have people that help you with shoots or, will come out while you're working and see what you're doing. And so there's this little sense of community that comes from it that I find more exciting than if I'm on the computer by myself all day. And I think that experimental style being in my portfolio is what made G-Monk interested in bringing me onto the Autofuss group. And they were known for doing a lot of experimental multimedia techniques. They were doing a lot with robotics and motion control, doing things with lasers and like all sorts of different techniques. And then they bring that into the digital space and do different techniques there and then refilm it in the real world. And so being around that environment really pushed me to take that experimental style and see how to pitch it for professional projects. And so then when I went out and freelanced on my own, I've had to get a lot better at that, on convincing clients to basically let me try things that I'm not totally sure how to do, but I could show them examples of things that were sort of working or things that were close, because I never want to just copy what someone's already done. I want to try and do a variation. And so it's always like, hey, look at this really cool thing and this really cool thing. I'm going to combine them and that'll make something new and fun. And so being in all those environments at Autofuss and in school gave me the foundation to keep pushing my experimental style and being really comfortable with failing a lot, because that's a big part of experimenting, is things usually go wrong and you just have to be able to push past that and find the stuff that you love in it. It's hard to pick a specific one, but I think my favorite memories from projects are from my first commercial project I did, which was right out of school when I got to Autofuss. G-Monk was directing the Off Cincinnati titles. And so it was essentially a title sequence for a design conference. And I knew Off was huge and really wanted to be a part of it in any way that I could. And so when G-Monk said we were going to do the titles and that I would get to do one of them, like kind of sub-direct my own, I was so excited to do that and was freaking out because he's like a big design idol of mine, and I knew everyone at the studio was going to be super talented and really, you know, they were going to put a lot of love into there. So I poured so much time and energy into that project. And the reason I love that project is not only because I pushed myself really hard on it and then was pushed by everyone else on the team, but that everyone was so supportive at that studio and everyone wanted to collaborate. Like nothing was competitive in the sense that you wanted to make something cooler than the other person's piece. There was just no one wanted to be left behind, like have the thing that obviously didn't have enough love put into it. So everybody made these really amazing all in-camera title reveals. And so mine was using like vacuum forming, where we like vacuum formed all this heated plastic over some typography for Anton and Irene. And everyone else had these amazing setups, and I learned so much from that project. And a lot of those techniques I actually use in my practical effects projects now, because everyone was so open about what they were working on, and most of them were just experimenting. They're like, hey, I've never tried this before, but I think it's gonna work. And so that had some of my favorite memories, because it really felt like a family working together to make something, as opposed to a studio that was doing work. Like it was sincerely fun, and I learned so much, and I hope to have more projects like that in the future. My definition of motion design would be any sort of visual content that evolves over time. It's hard to really define motion design because it's changing every day, especially now with things like Unreal Engine and Unity, like real-time things, stuff like Notch coming out. Now you can just make graphics that happen right in front of you. You don't have to wait for renders. The stuff I make is always, like, it's hard to tell people I'm a motion designer, because some people would look at my practical effects work and say, oh, you're a visual effects guy. Or other people look at it and say, oh, you're just like an artist that films their work like over time. You know, it's Some people would say I do animation. You know, it's very hard to define it. And I think that's why motion graphics or motion media is such a amazing field to be in, because no one puts you in a box and says, oh, if you're doing that, then this is what you make. You know, it's the Wild West. You just, you know, make what you love and see where it takes you. So skateboarding has always been a huge influence in my work. I started skating when I was about 13 years old, and it's always been something I did in tandem with music and art and design. And I think a big thing in skateboarding for me is that it's so much more fun when I get to skate with my friends. And when I get to go to a skate park, I really like doing park skating and vert. So inevitably there's always other people around. And so a big part of skating was getting comfortable learning and failing in front of other people. You know, they see you fall, they see you try something dumb, or they see you try something you definitely don't know how to do. And a lot of time your friends will either make fun of you or they'll give you props and, like, you know, get you amped up to try it again. And I try to bring that mentality into art and design, and especially practical effects, because when you're working on set with people, you usually have 5 or 6 people all right there watching you try something, and you're all watching the screen hoping it looks cool, and you kind of have that stress of, man, I really hope this thing works out, or else, like, they're gonna look at me and be like, wow, why did you try this? You're totally wasting an hour. And so I had to get comfortable with that idea that, yeah, I'm probably gonna fail in front of some people, and that's just part of getting better. And if I stress about that too much, then I'll never try something new, or I'll never move forward in the project, because I'll just get stuck on this one spot where I'm worried about failing. Versus if I know that I'll fail and I can come back and try it again, and that's just part of the process, then I actually move along much faster, and I get to that spot where the effects start looking right. Or in skateboarding, you know, it's like my 5th or 6th try on something, I actually get close to landing it, and then I finally get the trick. And so I think having hobbies like that really helped me get perspective on the design industry. And also, it hurts a lot more to fail skateboarding than it does in design. So that's kind of helped me, you know, like in design, it's like, oh, that, you know, people were disappointed the thing didn't come out right. But failing skateboarding, it's like you break a leg, or, you know, I fractured my wrist multiple times. And so, you know, failing in design feels easy compared to failing in skateboarding. So it's really helped me, I think, push past a lot of barriers in especially practical effects and live action stuff that involves working with a lot of other people. Music has also been a huge part of my life growing up. I first started playing the drums, I think around the same time I started skateboarding, when I was 13. And similar to skateboarding, playing music, especially jamming with people, is very similar to doing like practical effects or any sort of like design shoot, because in music, when you're jamming, you're literally having a conversation with these other musicians, and I'm usually on the drums, so I'm playing a drum beat, and then I have to choose, all right, I gotta feel it out. Are we gonna speed up? Are we gonna slow down? Should I try a crazy drum fill here? I might mess it up. And so everybody's kind of, you know, feeling the energy of the room. And I feel like you have to do that in practical effects a lot, or when you're doing a shoot, you have to, you know, vibe off of the energy of the room and see if people are excited about something, or if an effect is really just not working and people are, you know, unsure about it. And so I think playing music, especially playing live music, you know, on stage and all that, has helped me in so many aspects of design, and being comfortable with working with other people and communicating about things when I'm working with other people. And then on a story and structural level, I think music and animation just, you know, go hand in hand. Like the music affects so much of your piece, and the music similarly has the same, you know, you introduce elements, and then you go into your verse, and then you have your chorus, then you have your quiet part, then a chorus, and a big climax, and then the quiet, lead out. And I feel like the structure that I bring into music very often, especially as a drummer, that comes out in my motion graphics. So when I structure my storyboard, I often think of it like a song. And so, especially in practical effects, it's just so similar, because in practical effects, you often have a few visual elements that you have to figure out how are you going to ramp it up over time and surprise people. And so you start by introducing little vignettes of things, and that's like hearing a tiny bit of guitar at the beginning, and then you have your verse where you start seeing more elements, you're starting to understand what it is, and then the chorus, which is the big beautiful effects that really trap you in the piece. Then you have your quiet moody section, and then the big climax where everything's going crazy, you're layering everything together, and then it just ends on a big moment. And I feel like having played music for a long time, especially jamming with people and getting down the foundational structure of just general music making, has helped me with my animation story. And I also just love to compose music for visuals. There's so many times where I've started making a visual, it doesn't really feel right, and then I'll make some music for it, and all of a sudden that edit feels perfect. But then the music starts feeling weird, and so I'll change the edit there, and then the music starts feeling great there. And so I'll just ping pong back and forth. So I'll make the music, make the visuals, music, visuals, and that just, for me, is so much more exciting because I'm always jumping between mediums rather than constantly sitting in the same space. And so it keeps me very energized on my projects to both do the music and do the visuals. I think having any interest outside of motion design helps a lot. And especially for me, I'm a little ADD with things. I don't like to sit down and do one thing the whole day. So especially working from home, what's great is I can work on something, send it off for review, and then play keyboard or drums for a tiny bit, then check my emails, make some changes, and then go do something around the house, sketch or something like that, then come back and work on some more motion design and like animate or like go make a little more music. And having that those moments to jump back and forth between different things keeps me really stimulated and excited about things. And I think it's very easy to get worn out if you only do one thing all the time. And so having any sort of hobby outside of motion design, I think really helps just keep you excited about motion design. And for me, things like skateboarding and music have helped me draw a lot of parallels and things that have helped me in work, especially in regards to collaboration. So I think hobbies that involve collaborating with other people are really great if you're trying to get better at doing things where you need to film with like groups of people. And you'll start drawing connections between whatever your hobby is and motion design. And sometimes you can make really interesting personal projects that are based on that hobby, and then you start building a community outside of motion that's based on that. And like skateboarding is a huge thing for me, and I've actually met several skateboarders that do motion graphics, and like we were all just skating before the Motion Plus conference today, going out to Venice Beach and Huntington Beach skate park. And there's something really amazing when your two hobbies or two kind of worlds collide, and you have people that normally you can never talk about motion graphics about, all of a sudden they know what you're talking about when you bring up like After Effects or animation and things like that. And vice versa, it's great when I talk about doing like a front crook, and someone at a motion conference is like, oh, no, yeah, that's a crazy trick. Oh, and get excited about skateboarding. So it's really nice when you have these different worlds that sometimes combine and get you really inspired and excited about what you do. I think connecting my ideas with visuals is primarily done through metaphors, and using materials as metaphors is really important to me. And this is something I really started learning at art school, where when you do a presentation about what you wanted to do for your project, you had to justify everything. And especially in the graphic design department, they'd say, okay, you're making a poster. why are you printing it on that paper? Why are you using that typeface? Why are you using that color? You know, everything had to have a reason. And so when I got into motion graphics, I just had that same mentality of, okay, if I'm gonna do this technique and use this material, those need to have a reason. And that has always helped me sell my ideas later on. Like if a client's worried about something, they feel so much more confident if I can say, oh, but this material's great. It pertains to your brand. It pertains to this process that's related to the product that we're trying to advertise. You know, there's a reason for everything. And so that also gets me very excited when someone else talks about their project and I get to hear about their reasoning behind, oh, that's why they picked that color, or, oh, that typeface is really interesting because that's associated with all this history. And so I think having those kind of metaphors, like this material or this thing represents this, and people get these associations because of their cultural background or things they've experienced. I think that's a really nice way to tie in, especially experimental abstract things into an actual idea. And you know, I did this with a promotional piece for the Game Awards in 2015, where we were just trying to advertise this video game award show, and we wanted to show the idea of gamers and their energy of playing games feeding into this award show, and that's what powers it. And so we saw, you know, all these like transparent displays with graphics on them, and we go into the display and then we see all these circuit board tunnels, and there's liquid, kind of like those coolant liquids they have in like water-cooled computers. And so we had this like glowing liquid go through, and then that goes to a statue that comes to life, and all of it represented gamers' energy moving through a system to illuminate the statue. And so that's how we sold the idea. And so that, you know, that energy moving, like the liquid in the tubes, all those were metaphors for gamers' energy. So we just would take this archetypal idea, this just general concept, and try and embody it in all these different ways through these different techniques or different materials. And I think that is a big foundational thing for any sort of multimedia or like practical effects type of project. I think my dream work is always changing because I'm always experiencing new things where I say, wow, I'd love to make that. But I think ever since I started making music when I was younger, I've had a dream of being able to do a live music performance, like just completely solo, like just playing all the instruments at the same time, and doing something that's audio reactive. So an entire like dome show or like, you know, 360 visual experience for the audience, and just completely immersing people in like a cinematic audio visual experience. And I'm still working on the music side of it, but I've done a few projects with like dome projections and done some stuff for Coachella or these like big music festivals where the visuals are just on these grand scales. And I think that's where I feel most satisfied with work, is like when I get to see it huge and see people get fully immersed by it. And so I think that's what I'm trying to work towards in the future. And I mean, the biggest ideal, which I think a lot of artists are looking for, is really self-employing yourself, which for me would be if I made music and that went well enough that I could hire myself as a visual designer to make my own, you know, concert package. That would be amazing. And that's the dream. I don't know if it will ever happen, but I'm always striving towards it. And I like having goals like that maybe I'll never get to, but they keep me going to try and get to that point. And hopefully I get there someday. So if I wasn't in the art industry, excluding music or any like creative field, I think the only other thing I ever thought I could do was maybe being a pro skateboarder. That was like a dream when I was in high school, because I had done some skateboard competitions, had won a few intermediate ones at like a local skate park. And so it felt like maybe if I stuck with it, if I really pushed it, I could like get some sponsors and like make it a thing. But you know, that's a big dream. Being pro athlete is like a huge thing to commit to. So I'm really glad the art industry has been working out so far. So yeah, but pro skater would be pretty awesome too. That would be fun. I've been really honored to collaborate with a lot of people so far, especially in the motion graphics industry. You know, collaborating with mentors like G Monk have been huge for me. You know, there's a lot of big figures in motion design and cinema that I would really love to collaborate with. You know, huge directors like Ridley Scott would be amazing. And then there are people outside of motion design that have really influenced my work, like the sculptor Richard Serra. I did a report on him in college, and like his approach to sculpture really affected how I approached practical effects. And so, working with someone like him would be amazing. And just like people outside of motion design, I think would really inspire me. And I'm starting to work with more musicians, like doing visuals for their concerts. And so that has been a nice step away from the traditional motion graphic stuff. But hopefully I can just keep expanding and getting outside of just the motion graphics realm and get into working with more fine artists and people in cinematography, and just branching out and seeing what I can learn from these different disciplines. I'm constantly working on a personal music project where right now I play synthesizer with my left hand. I play an electronic drum set with my right hand. I have a drum pad that has samples that I put on it, mostly like bass lines that I play live. And then I have a microphone where I sing through a bunch of processors. And I'm hoping to start releasing the recordings from that this year and start doing visuals and like trying to make a brand around it and see if it goes anywhere, see if I, you know, could do a tour at some point in the future. That would be a dream. So I have things like that are constantly going, several personal projects that I've been waiting to do for a while, just waiting for enough time to give them love. But I think music is the big next step for me, and yeah, and then just going project to project right now, just seeing what comes up, because you never know. Like I've just been getting more projects that have allowed me to travel for them, and so I've been seeing a lot more of the world, and I'm hoping to do more of that, seeing more places that inspire me, and you know, maybe move somewhere over the next couple years. I always wanted to try Australia, and there's just so many amazing, inspiring places out there. So next steps are very broad, but hopefully more things that pertain to music and visuals. So first off, Cook, you are an amazing human, and I hope I can go to as many Motion Plus conferences as possible. Motion Plus is a huge chapter in my life. Like that first Motion Plus was such a big thing for me because it's the first conference I ever spoke at. So far, these are the only conferences I've ever spoken at. So it's just, you know, a huge moment for me in my career. And I've met so many cool artists and designers through this community of Motion Plus. And I think it's really what made me feel more a part of the community than anything else, because San Francisco is a very small community of motion designers. So being able to come out to these events and meet so many people and see the variety of people that are involved in this industry and see how friendly everyone is, it's just, yeah, it's some of my favorite experiences the past couple years, coming to Motion Plus and meeting everyone. So thank you guys so much for making Motion Plus happen and bringing together so many amazing artists that all are just so excited to be a part of this like weird community that we have called motion graphics.